Alright, so I wanted to make a video about the phases of combat sports and basically like one mental model you can apply. And so obviously the map is not exactly the terrain, right? So never looking at a map is going to tell you everything you need to know about what's actually going on there. But the maps and the models that we use to look at different activities can be very helpful. They can give us shorthands, they can help us glean useful information. So I remember I was listening to John Danaher talk about the 4 phases of MMA. And for him, his model that he looks at it through is that phase 1 is shoot boxing, so striking with takedowns. Phase 2 is working against the clinch in a standing position. Phase 3 is grappling from top, and phase 4 is grappling from bottom. And for me, that didn't ring very true. And he's a great coach, great model for him, obviously very grappling focused, so a lot of grappling is built into his model. But for me, the way I see fights play out is very different. So I like to look at it in 3 phases, and basically phase 1 would be when both opponents are standing. Phase 2 is when there's any intention and initiation of action to change from standing to the ground. And phase 3 is working on the ground. And so obviously we can very clearly see that those lines can blur very quickly. We can set up submissions as we're going to the ground. We can set up submissions while we're still standing. We can, the line between when we're throwing a strike and when we're initiating the takedown, or is the strike helping us initiate the takedown? There's a ton of gray area. That's why MMA is beautiful. But phase 1, striking on the feet, so we're considering striking in the open from a variety of stances. When the fence is, when we're on the fence, or even when we're close to the fence, and it's influencing how the striking plays out. Anywhere in the clinch, clinched along the fence, clinched out in the open. So all those different dynamics kind of exist. Hand trap range, inside boxing range, whatever we're talking about here, many ranges in that standing engagement. Phase 2 is when we're initiating that action and intention to take the fight to the ground. So takedowns in the open, defending takedowns in the open, takedowns against the cage, defending takedowns in the cage, judo style takedowns, trips, Greco style, freestyle, a ton of different variety of how we're going to get the fight to the ground. Even pulling guard, is one of those phase 2 activities. And then phase 3, we're looking at grappling on the ground. So, how we are grappling on top and on bottom, and where we are in relation to the cage, because grappling against a wall changes a lot of things in control points. And then within that, I look at fighters' skill sets and what they're able to do. So on the feet, are you able to knock somebody out? Like, do you have that kind of pop? And have you shown it in an actual fight? Versus, are you just consistently winning exchanges and dominating rounds? And those things have some overlap. So if you're constantly winning exchanges and you have the ability to knock somebody out, great. If you are winning exchanges but you're not a knockout artist, versus if you consistently are losing rounds but knocking people out, those are very different fighters who have very different skills and need very different things to work on and different game plans to fight against them. So you can look at all that stuff, how much damage you take, how much damage you give, the amount of significant strikes you land. One of the best metrics for success in MMA is how many significant strikes you land relative to your opponent. So how little damage do you suffer, and how hard are you to knock out, right? How difficult, both in, do you not allow situations to exist where you could get knocked out, and also do you have enough of a chin to take a good shot every now and again? Taking it to the ground, we're just looking at, can you make that takedown happen? How are you setting it up? What are your preferred ways of doing it? What type of opponents give you trouble, et cetera, et cetera. Vice versa, if you want to stay on the feet, how often are you even giving up takedown opportunities? How do you defend them? And in what phase, right? Like, you can defeat the takedown before they ever shoot just by maintaining good range. And then as they get closer and closer, you have different levels of defense, to include getting taken down and popping back up. So everything along the way. And then on the ground, we're looking at, can you take them down? Can you keep them down? Can you advance submission? Can you hit submissions, and can you land strikes? On bottom, can you strike effectively, not take damage, have the ability to stand up, have the ability to sweep, have the ability to transition into wrestling, have the ability to submit? So we're looking at all those skill sets. So it's a really effective way to look at the fight, like what phase is it in? If you're watching just a general fight, like what phase is it in, and what phase is the fighter trying to get to? It's a good way to evaluate skill sets. It's a good way to go back in your own fight and just be like, okay, phase 1, what happened? When we were in phase 2, what happened? How did takedowns get initiated, defended, etc., etc.? And phase 3, how did the groundwork go? And if any of those areas are showing you deficiencies, even if you won, but you didn't get easy takedowns, or on and on and on, you can start going back and retrofitting your game planning to that. And as you're game planning against opponents, you can just see like where are they trying to fight and how. Like, how's it playing out? It's like, okay, they want to be in phase 1, but here's how they're doing it. They're striking, but they get caught on the fence line, etc., etc. They're submitting everybody, so they're a phase 3 dominant fighter. They're like Damian Maia. Okay, well, how are they using phase 2 to get to phase 3, and how can we diffuse that before it happens? Like, what skill sets do we have that will keep that out? So just a different mental model for looking at fighting, but one that I think is very useful, both in learning MMA in general, in how you practice, and how you game plan, and how you after action fights.